As I said previously in my introductory video to my channel, I will be doing book reviews, and depending on how much I like a particular book, I will do a series presenting, or better stated, regurgitating what the author said. Now, I'm not sure about you, but when it comes to me, I am no scholar on these various issues. So if I do present anything, it's most likely going to be from those who know what they're talking about. So before I keep rambling on, let me begin. The title of this book, which is indicated by the video, is Salvation and Sovereignty, a Molinist Account. It is written by Kenneth Keathley, who is the Professor of Theology and Dean of Graduate Studies at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. This is where he earned his master's and PhD from. So where do we start? It's always of primary importance when reading any book to understand the goal or the goals of the author. Now, in this book, Dr. Keathley argues for two main points. Molinism as a model of divine sovereignty and human responsibility. That's one. And two, roses as a model for the doctrines of salvation. And this book argues against two main points two main ideas that are within Reformed theology. Namely, one, that God's perfections and infinite attributes require all choices and events to be understood in terms of necessity. And two, God's sovereignty and or man's depravity requires that choices, decisions, and actions are understood in terms of causal determinism. Immediately, four questions arise. What is Molinism? 1. 2. What is the model for the doctrine of salvation known as roses? 3. What is necessity? And 4. What is causal determinism? So let us focus on question number 1. What is Molinism? Molinism takes its name from the 16th century Jesuit priest Louis Molina. Within Molinism, it tries to accept two ostensibly contradictory things at the same time, namely that 1. God is meticulously sovereign over his creation, and 2. That humans have genuine freedom, which allows for them to make free choices and decisions which they must give account for. Now, the way in which these two ideas is reconciled is through God's omniscience. As Kenneth Keathley states in his book, and I quote, Molinism teaches that God exercises his sovereignty primarily through his omniscience, and that he infallibly knows what free creatures would do in any given situation. In this way, God sovereignly controls all things, while humans are also genuinely free. God is able to accomplish his will through the use of what Molinists label his middle knowledge. Some modern proponents of Molinism are philosophers like William Lane Craig, Alvin Plantinga, and Thomas Flint. And there's no need to worry if I haven't given a concise definition of Molinism. That will be done in the next video. So let us move to the second question, namely, what is this system known as roses? Now, I'm sure we all have heard of the famous flower within Calvinism, known as the tulip, but seldom have heard about roses. This is primarily because it's fairly new system. So Keathley in his book attempts to uproot the tulips and plant a new theological system known as roses. So what exactly does that acronym stand for? Well, the R in roses stands for radical depravity. The O stands for overcoming grace. The S stands for sovereign election. the E for eternal life, and the second S for singular redemption. Now let us quickly define these terms. This is how Dr. Keathley defines them. Okay, first, radical depravity. This emphasizes that every aspect of our being is affected by the fall of man and renders us incapable of saving ourselves. That's what the R in roses is for. Now the O, overcoming grace. This highlights God's persistent beckoning that overcomes our obstinacy. Now S, sovereign election. This affirms that God desires everyone's salvation, yet accentuates that our salvation is not based on us choosing God, but rather on God choosing us. Now E, for eternal life, stresses that believers enjoy a transformed life that is preserved, and we are given a faith which will remain. Now the S, for singular redemption, emphasizes that Christ did sufficiently die for every person, although efficiently only for those who believe. Now that we are done clearing up what this book argues for, we will now clarify two terms that the book argues against. And as I said a few minutes ago, Keathley is trying to argue against the idea that because of God's perfection and infinite attributes, this implies that all choices and events should be understood in terms of necessity. Now, what I'm merely doing here is defining necessity. Keathley defines necessity as, quote, the notion that since God knows beforehand whatever decisions a person will make, a possibility of choosing otherwise is never available. Okay, this is the first idea that he's arguing against. Now the second one is causal determinism, and he defines this as a, quote, specific type of necessity that argues that the choices made by a person are determined by his particular makeup and his given settings. In other words, a person's choices are determined by his nature and environment, so he does not have the ability to choose otherwise. So in the next video, I will offer a more precise definition of what Molinism is, and also a biblical defense of Molinism that Keathley offers. So if I talked fast, I'm sorry. I wanted to get it within 10 minutes. And don't worry if anything seems nebulous right now. I'll clarify it in the upcoming video. So thanks for watching. Peace.